name is Keith Strong. I'm the Executive Director of the Foundation of Oak Park. On behalf of our foundation and our co-host of Oak Park Public Library, thank you for joining us for today's event as part of our Hemingway in the 21st Century discussion series. And to learn more about our foundation, please visit our website at hemingway.com. Before we get started, I'd also like to thank the library's special collections team that curates the foundation's human archives. That includes Rachel, Anthony Smith, and Care. Today we're thrilled to welcome Dr. Sharon Hamilton, who is a teacher, writer, and researcher. As a member of the Society of American Baseball Research, she's also the co-founder and chair of Shaver's Century Committee, which celebrates the important milestones of baseball history. In addition to being a member of our foundation, Sharon likewise currently serves on the Hemingway Society board, has written extensively on Hemingway and baseball, as well as appearing on the Lone Shoe podcast, a friend of the foundation, and recent speaker here at our Dr. Mark Salino. Between her keen interest in baseball, literature, the Janus Age cocktails, Dr. Hamilton could be, and I would argue should be, considered a triple threat. And we look forward to her leading the discussion today at the intersection between America's favorite pastime and Hemingway. Please give her a round of applause.
I like being considered a triple threat. That's fantastic. Thank you very much for this great introduction. So even though I have this research interest in Hemingway and baseball, I'm actually Canadian. So if there's anything while I'm speaking where you say that is the weirdest way we've ever heard that pronounced, feel free to correct me. I won't be offended. Not from here. You're gonna have to look at the first line the whole time.
Let's stand by for a little assistance here.
First on the video. What if I stop the video? Because you don't need to see me. It's more
Right, yeah, try that.
Okay, now I'm not.
There we go.
Okay, perfect. I don't know what we did magically, but all right. And it is more important to see this next to me. So let me try. Let's see that. So it's more important to see this. All right. So this great photograph was actually sent to me from here. And this, I understand, is from the Oak Park Archives, which is fantastic. So shout out to the special collections. Here, this is their photograph, and Ernest Hemingway is the little guy with the baseball bat. So there you go. Hemingway and baseball, that's a lifelong obsession, and it starts when he's a child. Hemingway was born in a baseball city, and those of you who are from Oak Park, then you know this place. But this is being recorded and going out virtually, so there may be people not from here who are listening to this spot. So this is the Birthplace Museum of Hemingway here in Oak Park, just outside Chicago. He's born here in 1899, which is right near the beginning of the modern age. So there's baseball events here. What's the year that's considered the beginning of the modern World Series? Does anyone know the year? Close of 3. Yeah, 3. So, and you also have this. All of you will know this. Whiskey Park, also called the Baseball Palace of the World. It's a lot of it's a great description. And this is from 1910, so the photograph of opening day. So you have some of the first modern ballparks are here in this area. This beautiful construction, modern steel construction built here in Chicago. This was also a championship city. As many of you in the room already know, the Chicago Cubs were either World Series champions or World Series contenders for many of the years of Hemingway's childhood. 1906, they're in the World Series. They lost to, here's Chicago trivia, 1901 and 1907 and 1908, and he was the Tigers in 1920. The other Chicago team was also winning. So here you have the Chicago White Sox, so the World Series champions, as some of you already shouted out, in 1906, and they were also champions in 1917. And I don't know if any of you recognize some of the artifacts that I have on here. I took the photographs that are on this slide when I was at the National Hall of Fame Museum a couple of weeks ago. And so these are in the Hall of Fame. The S is that special S with the stars on it was from the 1917 World Series championship uniforms for the Sox. And that's one of the full uniforms and one of the shots. And that baseball is from the 1917 World Series. Chicago was home also when Hemingway was growing up to some of the best players ever to play the game. And you'll know these three guys. Their poem is still really famous. Tinker to Evers to Chance, right? So you have Joe Tinker, Johnny Evers, and Frank Chance, who were Hall of Famers for the Chicago Cubs. These are baseball cards from 1910. And again, I took these photos when I was in the Hall of Fame Museum. So. Also here, these spikes were worn by Mordecai Three-Finger Brown, who was an incredible Cubs pitcher when Hemingway was a child. And beside the spikes, very famous White Sox player. This portrait is again from the National Baseball Hall of Fame. It's, I think, there because they don't actually let it in, because this is Shoeless Joe Jackson, of course, accused of hoping to throw the 1919 World Series. This city is also important to baseball and American history for this fact. And those of you who will have seen the Ken Burns baseball series, he tells this story. You can see actually a couple of nods. The Star-Spangled Banner was played here in Chicago during Game 1 of the 1918 World Series in the 7th inning stretch. And here there was a man who came in with a Boston cap. That World Series Game 1 was played against the Red Sox. And this guy over here was the pitcher. Anyone recognize the Red Sox pitcher from 1908? Yeah, Babe Ruth. That's Babe Ruth. That's Babe Ruth pitching for the Sox. So that Game 1, the Star-Spangled Banner is played in the 7th inning stretch. It takes off, and for the rest of that series, it starts being played before the game. So this is well before the Star-Spangled Banner became the national anthem. And this may have been the impetus for the popularity of this song. It helped to make it into the national anthem later because it was already associated with baseball. It was already popular. And because this happened in 1918, it was associated with patriotism. It's during the war. So that's also part of Chicago baseball history that's happening in Hemingway's childhood and young adulthood. So Hemingway grows up in a baseball-loving city. I showed you earlier the photograph of the birthplace home from 1899, which is now a museum. This is a photo, again, those of you who live here will know, this is the Boyhood home, which is in Oak Park. There may be people who are watching this virtually who may not be familiar with this house. That shot's maybe a little bit less well known. And I've got a photograph there. You can see the plaque that is actually on the front lawn of the Boyhood home. So you can go and see that. It's a private home. It's not a museum. You can't go inside. But you can see outside where Hemingway grew up. And his mom, Grace Hall, Hemingway helped to design that home. So Hemingway is growing up in a baseball-loving city. He's also growing up in a baseball-loving family. This slide shows a photograph from the Hemingway collection at the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum from the family photograph collection of Clarence Hemingway, Hemingway's father. And on the slide, you can see the letter that's in the Hemingway Letters Project from Volume 1. This is a letter Ernest Hemingway wrote to his father. He was on a train in 1912, May 1912, so he would be 12 years old at the time. Dear Dad, I looked up in my baseball schedule and found that the New York Giants play Chicago Cubs for the championship on Saturday, May 11th. We will have choir rehearsal in the morning, and the afternoon will be free. The game starts at 3 o'clock. Let's see if we can't go. It will be a daddy game. He also promises to do his homework in the same letter. So he really wanted to go to this game. In the footnotes to this letter, if you're reading that volume, they can't figure out why he called it championship game. I mean, it's in May. This isn't the right time of the year to have a championship, but maybe he just means a big game or exciting game. He certainly wants to go to the game and he's following the kind of schedule. So we know that Hemingway's a baseball fan. Clarence, his father's also a baseball fan, and he certainly tried to get his dad to take him to baseball games. It turns out that it's not only Hemingway and his father who are baseball fans. What I've got on the slide here now is from a blog post from Wheaton College Special Collections, and it shows a baseball score. And this is, so before the invention of the box scores, this is from around 1868 to 1869. It's more like a cricket scorebook because there's a transition between baseball and cricket. Baseball is still being figured out as a sport. But this book from 1868 to 1869 has an entry in it on Hemingway. And so the archivist who wrote this blog post says he thinks that this is Hemingway's paternal grandfather, Anson Hemingway. And that he did attend Wheaton, he's there at the right time. And if it's that Hemingway's grandfather played third base when he was at college. So there you go. And that's very early baseball history. So that's actually really fun to know that, and you can actually see it. It's not here on the slide. It's right here. Hemingway. And if you go to the Wheaton College blog, or you can email me, I can send you the link and you can see it more clearly, but it's cool to see it there because it's blown up a bit, it's hard to read the name, but it's definitely a Hemingway. So this is a question I get a lot when I talk about baseball and Hemingway. Who did he cheer for? Cubs or a White Sox fan? And you might think that was a clear-cut thing because I've already showed you his asking to go to Cubs game, right? But it turns out it's not that straightforward because this player over here, Nick Altrock, is the star pitcher for the White Sox in the dead ball era years, the early years of the 20th century. And it turns out Dan Anderson lives locally here, works locally here in our park. He's recently written an article about allusions to Nick Altrock that appear in Hemingway's bullfighting books, Death in the Afternoon and Dangerous Summer. And the way he uses Nick Altrock in those books is he's comparing him to great matadors. So he's basically saying, this is what a great athlete looks like. And so that's a White Sox allusion. And so it does look like that, and you'll see also the other allusions to the White Sox in this talk, it does look like Hemingway actually cheered for both teams. I don't know whether that's because he lived in Oak Park, and he didn't have to choose a side. And at that time, the Cubs were playing on in the west side, actually. They didn't move until later. Hemingway's childhood, we would have seen on the west side, but he still doesn't seem to necessarily be choosing a side. He appreciated both teams. This is another clue that we have, that Hemingway had eclectic taste in baseball players. He wasn't just committed to one team. This is an advertisement from the Sporting News, March 7th, 1912, page 8. And you can see on the slide it says, baseball players action pictures, 5 cents each. This seems to be the ad that Hemingway was responding to in a letter that you'll find in the letters collections, Hemingway Letters Project, Volume 1, again in 1912. So this is when he is 12. And he writes, Mr. Charles C. Spink and Son, which is the name of the company selling cards. Gentlemen, enclosed, please find 35 cents, for which send me the following baseball action pictures. Matheson, Mordecai Brown, Sam Crawford, Jas P. Archer, Frank Schultz, Owen Bush, Fred Snodgrass. on one team. My theory is that Hemingway, and this is certainly borne out by his writing, was obsessed by excellence, even when he was a child. He wanted the best of the best. Who were the best players playing the game? And if you think about later in his life, Hemingway often called out writer friends he thought were not performing at their best. He makes fun of F. Scott Fitzgerald in Snows of Kilimanjaro. He writes The Torrents of Spring to make fun of Sherwood Anderson because he thinks Sherwood Anderson is underperforming as a writer. And I think, again, it's this obsession with excellence, but not necessarily a bad obsession, because obviously it drove his own desire to be the best in his own writing. And I think you see that in his taste in baseball figures. Didn't really care which team he played for, as long as they were the best of the best. Here's something else I think influenced Hemingway when he was a kid. This book, Pitching in a Pinch, by the way, you can still read it, it's still being published, is a book by Christy Matheson, who was a New York Giants pitcher, and one of the baseball action figures Hemingway ordered was for his son, for Christy Matheson, who again is considered one of the best of the best. So the question is Christy Matheson a possible source for the Hemingway Code? This book is, by the way, not in the list of books in Hemingway's library from the JFK, but I think he read it. It's published in 1912 when he's living here in Oak Park. Christy Matheson was a well-loved major star figure. I think he either got this book from the library. By the way, shout out to the Park Public Library. Hemingway loved taking out library books. So he could have got it here. He also could have borrowed it from another kid. Everyone was reading this book, right? I think he read it, and I'm going to read you passages from this book that I think he paid attention to. This is Christy Matheson on Pitching in a Pinch. Certain intellectual fans call it the crisis. College professors interested in the sport have named it the psychological moment. Big league managers mention it as the break, and pitchers speak of the pinch. This is the time when each team is straining every nerve, either to win or to prevent defeat. The players and spectators realize that the outcomes of the inning is of vital importance, and in most of these pinches, the real burden falls on the pitcher. It is at this moment that he is putting all he has on the ball, and simultaneously his opponents are doing everything they can to disconcert him. Managers wait for this break, and the shrewd league leader can often time it. Frequently, a certain style of play is adopted to lead up to the pitch. Then suddenly a slovenly mode of attack is changed, and the team comes on with a rush in the effort to break up the game. That is the real test of the pitcher. He must be able to live through these squalls. And so I think what you have described there is the famous Hemingway code, brace under pressure. He's saying the game is riding on you, everything depends on you throwing this ball the right way. They're trying to disconcert you. Everyone on the team, the managers, they're trying to disconcert you, and you have to come through this wall. You have to come through the brace under pressure. I don't know, I think Hemingway read that in 1912. I'm also a huge fan of Christy Matheson myself, so I like to think that that's from him. Okay, here's some baseball mysteries. Chicago baseball. Christy Matheson and Mordecai Brown, we know Hemingway admired both of these players. I showed you the ad where he used 12 in order for baseball with action pictures for both of these pitchers. They had a showdown in 1916, September 1916, here in Chicago. Did Hemingway go to the game? This is one for the archivists in the room. Find that ticket. Did Hemingway go to this game? September 4th, 1916. If you want to read about it, by the way, I wrote a blog post for Sabre about this game. So if you Google Sharon Hamilton, Matheson, Brown, Sabre, this will show up. I wrote about this game. These pictures were not that great by that point. Brown is just at the end of his career, and Matheson was really already working mainly as a manager. He wasn't really playing anymore. He was already playing with the Cincinnati Reds. He wasn't with his New York Giants anymore. But it was kind of like the Oscars, you know, those Lifetime Achievement Awards. When you read the coverage of this game, everyone just talked about how they changed baseball and everybody loved them and they're just so fantastic. And so I wonder, was Hemingway there? It was played here in Chicago. I think he was in Chicago in September 1916. I haven't found a reference saying he was not here. And I can't imagine he wouldn't have gone. He loved both these guys, and it really was a tribute game. But we haven't got concrete proof. So a letter, a ticket stub, these would be great things if somebody finds them. And anyway, I think he would have wanted to go. And since many people here are also literature fans, I'll throw out another reference for you. If you read This Side of Paradise, that's Scott Fitzgerald's first novel, he talks about Matheson and Brown. He said that the kids in the courtyards would argue about who was the better pitcher, Matheson or Brown. So both Hemingway and Fitzgerald. All right, here's another Chicago baseball mystery for you. And this one, I was presenting also at the Society for American Baseball Research Conference this week, and I showed these photos to them, and I said, help me identify what's in these photos. What we know about these photos is that they're from 1915. They're in the JFK Hemingway collection. When I asked them if we know whether the photos are by Hemingway or his father Clarence, the guess at the JFK is probably Hemingway, and this is their reason. These photos were made, they're prints from negatives, the negatives were donated by Mary, Hemingway's fourth wife. So the odds are that they were from Hemingway, not from Clarence, in which case Hemingway was at this game in 1915. His dad could have been there too, actually. So next question is, what's the team, what's the park? So I asked this question actually before I came to this conference, the SABRE conference, of a SABRE researcher, Sharon Hamilton, and I'm going to show you how he helped me decode at least a little bit of the history. So first, these are Hemingway's photos. This one, I wanted to show you this one. These are all of the JFK. All right. Now for identifying the baseball photos, this is where Sean helped me. Sean is based here in Chicago, so he pulled up some photos from the Chicago Historical Society. So the clearer photo that you see on one side of this slide is a photo from 1915 of the Chicago White Sox. So for sure we know that's Whiskey Park. This is Hemingway's photo, the more blurry one. He said, look at the scoreboard. Looks like the same scoreboard, right? So the JFK doesn't know for sure which park, which team, but Sean, in his comparison, that looks pretty convincing. And you can see, actually, you can see the Chicago Tribune on the Hemingway photo. This one also, even more convincing. You can see, so again, Sean found in the Chicago Historical Society, the photo is clearer. There's a known photo from 1915 from Whiskey Park in the White Sox game. You can see the no betting in this park on the one on the wall, very, very clearly in the photo that Sean found. You can see it as well, blurry, but there. And the main thing is, though, Sean said, look at those windows, like the distinctive windows, right? That really, where, in essence, where it's going to be. So I think we can be certain that this is the Red Sox. I think we can be certain that this is Whiskey Park. So the next question is, can we figure out which game and which players? So fortunately, there are some experts in the SABRE organization on baseball pitchers, and they've already said they are going to help you with this. It would be great if they were able to go back to Boston and look at the prints that they have there, because all I have are photographs that are not very clear. Hopefully they can get a close enough look at the scoreboard. I don't know, magnifying glass or whatever, figure out what game, and then they can help to figure out which players. So anyway, it's a good mystery, but I think part of it is to solve. So now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Hemingway and the Black Sox scandal. I guess I should ask you first of all, you all know what that is? You're nodding, are there any head shakes? Someone say it. What's the Black Sox scandal about? They threw the 1919 World Series, exactly. So, how did Hemingway feel about that? This is not a mystery, we know. The answer to how Hemingway felt about that is in the letters, volume 1, if you want to read the letters project. Basically, it boils down to there are a couple of revealing letters. one of the letters is from 1920, right after Shoeless Joe and two other White Sox have confessed to taking money from gamblers. It was in the fall of 1920 that the confessions happened. And Hemingway had a friend who teases him for having bet on the White Sox to win the 1919 World Series. So we know that he believed in them, and then was obviously quite annoyed that they had let him down. So that's not a mystery. Also, the Black Sox trial, so it took another year for various reasons. The Black Sox criminal trial for throwing the 1919 World Series took place in Chicago in 1921 when Hemingway was living in Chicago. He moved to Chicago in the fall of 1920. He's still there in 1921, working for the Cooperative Commonwealth, a socialist magazine. He was literally right down the street. He was working in the Loop District. He's really close to where the trial was taking place. And he was disgusted. And you can read a lot of accounts about this. In biographies of Hadley, there's good coverage of this. And also the Letters Project, he talks about how what a corrupt place Chicago is in response to the trial. And I've written about it as well. If you look about this article, Hemingway, the Black Sox trial, this is online. I wrote it for Sabre, so you can read about, if you're interested in more detail, about his reaction to the Black Sox trial. Now, here is another baseball mystery for you. And I mentioned this in the little write-up blurb for this talk. Was Hemingway the first writer to use the baseball idiom off base in a novel? First, we'll start with what he says. So this is from Ernest Hemingway, Farewell to Arms, 1929. That was what you did, you died. You did not know what it was about. You never had time to learn. They threw you in and told you the rules, and the first time they caught you off base, they killed you. We take that for granted. I actually haven't seen this commented on in the issues of this book. It doesn't get a footnote and an explanation, but actually it should, because this is, any way you slice it, early. To get to using off base as a baseball idiom in literature, it's very early. On this one, I asked for help. Hemingway researcher John Marco, who's here in the back row, he does research on Hemingway quotations, and so I asked him, is this the earliest example of this appearing in a novel? And if not, how does it compare? So I'll show you part of what he found. It's very early for appearance in a novel. It does appear earlier, interestingly, in nonfiction. And so the very first example on the slide here is from 1907. It's from a book on Africa. And the quote is, "The hippo heard us, and like a baseball player caught off base, tried to get back to the river." That is such a weird comparison to make. A hippo does not really move anything like a baseball player, but there you go. It means it is an idiomatic expression, or fairly early, but it's still not necessarily appearing in print all that commonly. John found another example from 1927 and one from 1929, and I put on the slide the one from 1929, this is Years of Farewell to Arms. "Poor kid," said Mark, looking down at her with tenderness. "What a long way off base you are." So there are other authors using it, but not many. And one of the questions that I'll raise with you, and I also raised at the Sabre conference earlier this week, was, is it possible that Hemingway helped put this expression as solidly as it is into the English language? We all take it for granted now. And his A Farewell to Arms was a bestseller. I'm pretty sure Marcia Davenport's East Side, West Side from 1929 was not the book that helped popularize it, and neither was The Congo of the Coast of Africa from 1907. So Hemingway may have helped solidify this idiom in American English. That would be interesting to know. And so I'm also still curious myself how often it appeared before 1929 in print. So that was a challenge for the Sabre researchers, and I'll mention it to you too. If you encounter it in books before 1929, let me know. I'm interested in that. All right, here's a little bit of a mystery, and this is again a shout out to my Red Sox fan who's in the audience. Here's the Babe wearing his Red Sox uniform when he's a Red Sox pitcher. Did Hemingway see Babe Ruth play as a pitcher? Odds are very high, because here Hemingway is at a baseball city. He can see both American League and National League games. The Red Sox, are playing in the American League. They're playing against the White Sox. So they're in town all the time. Did Hemingway see Babe Ruth as a pitcher. Personally, I love the idea that they could have been in the stadium at the same time. Hemingway is right on the edge of being one of the most famous writers in the world. And Babe Ruth, who has not started being a batter yet for the New York Yankees, is just on the edge of being one of the most famous baseball players of all time. So I kind of like that synergy that they could have been in the same stadium at the same time. I think odds are high. But again, shout out to the archivists in the room. Find me a ticket stub. I haven't seen one yet that proves that he was at a Red Sox stadium when Ruth was a pitcher. We do know, however, that Hemingway was paying attention to Ruth as a pitcher. Here's the proof on the screen. This is a quote from Farrell's arms. It's from the part where Frederick Henry is in the hospital with the man recovering. The Chicago White Sox were winning the American League pennant, and the New York Giants were leading the National League. Babe Ruth was a pitcher then, playing for Boston. It's in his novel. So he's definitely aware that Babe Ruth was a pitcher. I think it's kind of a real cool cocktail fact already by 1929, right? People remember Ruth was a great pitcher before he was a great batter. So he knew, but did he see him play as a batter or as a pitcher? We don't know. Here's a picture I promised, again, the Red Sox fan here. I took this picture outside Fenway Park. Just a reminder that people also had reason to pay attention to the Red Sox in the years that Hemingway was growing up. This is also a championship team, right? And they got the flags right out every time up. So here's another Chicago baseball mystery for you. Did Hemingway ever see a Federal League game? The Federal League was a briefly existing baseball league in 1914 and 1915 in Chicago. Did he ever see the Chicago Whales play? I see no evidence for that in letters or ticket stubs, but I think it's also likely. He's a baseball fan. Wouldn't you be interested in a new league that has started up and you can just get to by taking the train into the city? I think he went, but we don't have proof of that yet. Same thing here, Chicago American Giants. The Negro League started in 1920. Hemingway was living in Chicago in 1920 and 1921. Did he see a Negro Leagues game? Don't know. But this would be really fascinating to find out. And again, wouldn't you be curious? It's a brand new league, right? I'd be curious. And here's another Chicago baseball mystery. Did he go to the 1917 World Series game 1? Here's what we know. We certainly know what happened in that game, because he wrote about it. So here we again have evidence of at least knowing about it. He was in town before he went to, just in town, barely in town, before he moved to Kansas City to take up a job as a journalist there after graduating from high school. And he writes about this in his short story. It's really a short sketch. We call it now, we would say it's flash fiction. It's a story without a real beginning or an end, but it's got a mood. It's a story about happiness. I love it. Crossing Mississippi is a great story. And this is a quote from Crossing Mississippi. Nick thought of the World Series game going on in New York. He thought of Happy Felch's home run in the first game being watched at the White Sox Park. And then there's more, actually, there's a full description of the play. It's baseball. Hemingway could have written the box score. He could have written articles on the game. Just the fact that he describes this play in great detail doesn't mean that he actually saw it, but doesn't mean he didn't. So this is another one I'd love to see a ticket stub or a letter turn up. And it could be, there's a new archive that stages bought of Hemingway's trunks that he was keeping in Sloppy Joe's bar in the back. Does one of those trunks have an answer to this question in mind? Here's another speculative one, but this is also close to my heart because it's such an interesting part of American history. So who is the large man near the front of the photo? This large man near the front of the photo, Al Capone, moved to Chicago sometime in the fall of 1920. He had been living in Brooklyn. The Prohibition has just come into force, and there's opportunities for this man here in Chicago to become involved with the underworld. And of course, within a few years, he's running it, right? So this photo, this is actually from a Saber article. You can look it up online. If you look at September 9th, baseball, Jack Zerbe wrote one blog post about this game that we know Al Capone was at because there's a photo of that. And of course, he points out right behind Al Capone, the men in the fedoras, the kind of conspicuous bodyguards, and that's Capone's son, Sonny, right beside him. So we know Capone was a baseball fan. And this is, he was attending a Cub White Sox charity exhibition. Again, were Capone and Hemingway ever in a baseball game at the same time and those stands together? They absolutely could have been. This is a mystery we're not going to solve because Capone, for obvious reasons, was very careful to not keep track of his personal life. So even if you Capone biographies, there's not a lot of detail because he was not keeping a lot of detail. But it's still possible. They were in the city at the same time they were playing baseball. I like to think that these two major figures of American history were in the park sometime at the same time. And this is where I'm going to end. This is not about Chicago baseball anymore, but it's where Hemingway's love of baseball led. And this is a photo from Brian Gordon Sinclair, and it's a recent photo. I think he said it's from last year or the year before. This is a kids team in Cuba, still plays, has Ernest Hemingway. And so I'm just going to read you a little blurb about these kids and their team. This is from a prologue to a book called Home Run Kid that I'm going to tell you a bit more about in a minute. The Giggy All-Stars Community Project offers children in the neighborhood a safe space for playing baseball. It also draws their families near to the museum, and the museum being referred to as the Museum Hemingway. It's Hemingway's home that they created. Fostering among them a love for Hemingway, whom they know is one of the greats of world literature, who had his home in their neighborhood, who created the first baseball team in San Francisco, Chicago. Since the official christening of the Giggy All-Stars in January 2010, the team was enthusiastically welcomed by the children and their parents. Hundreds of children, 4 to 12, have participated in the project. And that statement is from Ada Rosa Alfonso Rosales, who's the director of the Museum Hemingway. And this is a little bit more about that. This is a wonderful book, and I recommend this to your attention. If you have not read this book, it is a treat. It is a first-person account by one of the kids who played with Ernest Hemingway when he founded this baseball team. And he founded the baseball team for his kids. He had his two sons, Patrick and Gregory, from his second wife, Pauline, were young when he was living in Cuba and loved baseball and wanted to play this American thing. And so Hemingway founded this team for them. The name of the team comes from the nickname. Giggy is what he called his son Gregory. It's his nickname for Gregory. And this, anyway, he said, this book is adorable. I'm going to read you a few passages from this book, from the memories of this home run kid who played with Hemingway when he was a kid. And his nickname is Cayuco John Yarrow, and his real name is Oscar Blas Fernandez. And Brian Gordon Sinclair, who I mentioned to you, assisted with the translation and writing of this book. For 20 years now, I've been recording my memories. I commit these memories to paper to honor Ernest Hemingway and the kindness he showed to me when I was a child. We had no playgrounds in our neighborhood, and in those towns that did have a recreation center, only those from the wealthier families could use them. If we did have one, I still couldn't have used it. Every member had to pay a fee, and even if I had the fee, they only wanted whites. I was poor, I was black, and I was excluded. This is from later in the book where he talks about the experience of the first time he meets Ernest Hemingway for a game. And this is Hemingway speaking. Good morning, boys. How are you? He asked everyone. We're fine, sir, we all answered in unison. I've invited you here to meet Giggy and Patrick and to play together as friends. This is Giggy. He put his hand on the shoulder of the smaller boy, Giggy, who appeared to be 8 or 9, looked at us with a child's mix of shyness and curiosity. His proper name was Gregory, but he would always be known to us as Giggy. Then Ernest Hemingway put his hands on the shoulder of his other son and said, this is Patrick. Patrick was older, about 11 or 12, and taller with long legs. He too looked at us with curiosity. Giggy was the first to step forward. He walked right up to me and asked, who are you? And then a little bit later in the same passage, Ernest Hemingway's steward appeared from inside the house with a complete set of baseball equipment. The catcher's mitt, first baseman, 7 gloves, 2 bats, and 7 balls. Everything was new and unused right from the factory. Well, kids, said Ernest Hemingway, everybody take your gloves and the bats and the balls, and let's go play baseball. I could hardly believe it. I chose a fine yellow glove and said, "Look, sir, this glove is for playing center field. I'm a center fielder." What nerve I had, but it paid off. Ernest Hemingway turned to the others and said, "Listen, everybody, this will be Cayuco's love for playing center field." To say I was ecstatic would be an understatement. I was the happiest kid in the world. I had always dreamed of having my own glove. Now I had it, and I had everything needed to go with it. A place to play, friends to play with, and beautiful friends. So there you go. There's where the story of the Chicago baseball ends up in Cuba, but that love of baseball that you developed here when the Cubs and the White Sox were the huge championship teams stayed with me. And that's my talk. Thank you.